Welcome back. You're listening to ConversationsLive.net. And my next guest is somebody I said at the beginning of the show, I wish I had her job. She is Natalie McLean. She's a wine writer with a difference. She's an accredited sommelier. She's a speaker and judge. She's won 4 James Beard Journalism Awards and 6 Burt Green Awards for excellence in food journalism. That's just to name a couple of her distinctions. Her print wine columns reach over 5 million readers, and her free wine e-newsletter goes to more than 36 countries. She's the author of Red, White and Drunk All Over, which was selected as the best wine literature book at the Gourmand World Cookbook Awards. And her new book sent her on adventures around the globe. It's called Unquenchable, a tipsy quest for the world's best bargain wines. Welcome, Natalie McLean. Welcome.
Oh, thank you, Vicki. It's great to be here with you.
Well, I have to say congratulations, first of all, because I saw on your Twitter feed this morning that Amazon just selected Unquenchable as one of the best books of 2011.
Oh, I'm so thrilled. Yes, absolutely. I think I also thank the Twitter universe for that, because I think it's so different these days publishing a book compared to when the first one came out in 2006, in that things can go more viral these days because of Facebook and Twitter and so on. So anyway, I'm thrilled.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of wine books out there. Why do you think yours is so appealing? I know why I think it is, but I'm wondering why you think it is.
Well, my approach is to try to tell the story of people in the wine industry, and by telling their story, tell the story of wine. So I try to seek out the most interesting, colorful, passionate, obsessive, iconic winemakers, and in talking with them, learn about wine and so on, but also go on adventures with them, so that instead of just giving you a book full of tasting notes, or here is this region, here is
right.
the climate, here is we just go on adventures together, and you come with me as an armchair traveler, and you learn about these people, but then at the end of the book, I hope you realize you've learned a lot about wine too.
Yeah. Now, in your first book, Red, White and Drunk All Over, I haven't read that, I have to say, but I read that you did also go out in the field in that book, but you did it as, spending a day in the life of kind of situation.
Exactly.
In this one, you encompassed travel all over the world. You encompassed animals a lot. They appeared in every single chapter.
I know, that's just bizarre, but anyway, it ended up that way.
Yeah.
So shark diving and polo horse riding and all, but they are related to the story.
Yes, definitely. And I read that you visited, for this book, 8 countries, 312 wineries, and 15,267 wines were involved.
Yes, my liver for the people. I'm very thorough and hedonistic with my research, but you do have to, as I say, kiss a lot of Venus frogs to find those princes. So, just even on a daily basis, apart from writing this book, I'm tasting wine frequently just to find the good ones, because as you know, it's really hard to tell how a wine tastes by the label. But yes, to get back to your point, I did go all over the world, the travel and so on. I always try to see if I can inject some sort of action element into the stories, and that is a challenge for wine, because wine isn't exactly, a James Bond thriller kind of genre. But so in the first book, as you said, I worked as a sommelier, day in the life of, wine store, helped with the harvest, and so on. I didn't want to do that all over again, so thus the, going shark diving with a winemaker in South Africa. And then we pair seafood and wine. It has a connection.
Right, it definitely has a connection.
Exactly. So, but I think you've got to have some action, some adventure, if you're going to carry people along and keep them with you.
I love how you describe it at the end of the book, because there was one point when you questioned, how come I ended up writing about wine, and how come I'm not a doctor saving children and lives and that kind of thing? But then you decided you were still doing a great service, a hedonistic service at some point. But I love that you said you've always searched for what you call the flesh knowledge, the understanding of life skinned of its social protocols. And I think that comes through in the book and is what makes it so interesting.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I think people appreciate transparency as much as you can, and that's a lot of why there is self-questioning in this book, because it's all out there. But also, I admit to liking the buzz, the alcohol of wine, which is a little bit on the rare side for wine writers. I think I did come to the conclusion it was still worthwhile writing about wine, because I'd always had the guilt that I was just relieving bourgeois stress,
Right.
suggesting wines for rich people. And at the end of the day, we all work hard. Life's tough and challenging, and I think we need to relax. And I'm, of course, not advocating alcohol dependency, but, it is really nice at the end of the day with dinner to have a glass of wine. And I think that's just as important.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
I want to share a little bit of your background, and then I want to look at some of the stories in your book, because you really did come across some great characters. My favorite was, of course, Wolf Bass, the Australian, but we'll talk about him in a moment. Let's talk a little bit about you, first of all, Natalie, because you you've faced a lot of challenges in male-dominated environments. You were a Scottish Highland dancer, and that was dominated by men. You then moved into being a marketing manager in a male-dominated industry. You then transferred to writing about wine, and again, fairly heavily dominated by males at that point. What have you learned from being in that kind of environment? What do you think drew you to those kind of environments?
Yeah, I wasn't seeking that out deliberately. I just think that my skills and interest and passion were in those areas. And so I happened to always be working with men or going to school with men. And I found it a very interesting experience because, it's tempting to just try to be one of the boys, but you can't. And so you have to really step back and go, okay, this is what I love to do, but I'm working with lots of men. So how do I do that effectively? And I think as a woman in the wine industry especially, there can be, some advantages in terms of the way, still going back to old stereotypes about women, the way you can be more disarming or not as threatening, that kind of thing. And I think if you use those things to your advantage in a positive way, so when I'm interviewing someone, often male winemakers, I think it can be, if you can use all your skills and who you are to get a better story, that's a good thing. If you can put someone at ease, if they feel more comfortable talking to you, so I came around to it eventually that way because I wanted to do what I was passionate about, and I had to learn how to operate in an environment where there weren't a lot of women.
Right.
Yeah.
So how did you go from marketing to wine writing? What was the transition like for you there?
Well, it was quite the jump, and I say you could only do it in a sleep-deprived, period in your life. It was while I was on maternity leave with our first and only child. So I'd always taken wine courses and read wine books just for fun because I loved wine. It fascinated me. But I never thought I could earn a living at it, writing about it or whatever. And so it wasn't until, I had been without sleep for many weeks and that I made this leap of illogic and thought, I'll write something about wine because I wanted to keep my brain alive while I was on maternity leave. Mm-hmm. So I thought, I'll pitch a local magazine to write about wine on the internet. And that was about 12 years ago.
Wow.
And they accepted it. It became a regular column. I thought, I'm just going to pitch other editors. And I just started cold calling and didn't have really any insider contacts or anything like that. And then I just knew, oh my goodness, I love this. This is terrific. I can, do what I love. I can work from home. It just seemed like a dream. But it really, I literally stumbled into it. There was no grand plan.
Right. Well, I think oftentimes the best things happen that way.
Yes, I agree.
We're going to take a quick break. And now, of course, your columns are reaching over 5 million readers. So that's a big transition there. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, I want to start looking at some of these great adventures you had in the book and talking about some of the wines that you recommend from those adventures.
Sure.
My guest in this segment is Natalie McLean. Her book is called Unquenchable: a tipsy quest for the world's best bargain wines. And you're listening to Conversations Live with Vicky St. Clair.
Everybody could hear me shout, give me that wine, oh, give me that wine, yeah, give me that wine, 'cause I can't cut loose without my juice.
At Sundown Communications, we find that most of our clients are brilliant at what they do, but they lack the time and resources to write and create business messaging that delivers results. That's where we come in, providing a diverse range of professional copywriting services for fresh strategic web content, PR, advertising and promotion, marketing, speeches, and much more. Call us today so you can focus on what you do best, and we'll do the rest. Call 800-495-7617. That's 800-495-7617.
Hi, this is Julie Forbes. Join me on Wednesday afternoons from 2 to 3 p.m. for the Dog Talk Show, an evolved perspective on life with dogs. Listen to discussions on dog-related topics and call in to voice your opinion or ask my opinion about your dog. We will talk about everything from dog behavior to pet food to dog training programs in prisons. The Dog Talk Show, an evolved perspective on life with dogs. I'm your host, Julie Forbes. Tune in Wednesdays from 2 to 3 p.m. on Alternative Talk 1150.
Conversations Live with Vicky St. Clair discusses issues that are important to you, like good health and well-being, finding a new job and building your business, overcoming life's big challenges and making sense out of chaos, and living with passion and joy. Join us Mondays at noon Pacific for Conversations Live with Vicky St. Clair. See conversationslive.net for show schedule and guest information.
Thanks for listening to Conversations Live with Vicky St. Clair. Follow me on Twitter at Vicky St. Clair.
1150kknw.com, your connection to Alternative Talk, 1150 AM.
Oh, give me that wine, give me that wine, so I can drink one toast before I roast. No sense in going out half-baked, might as well be all to her. You can take all those...
And welcome back, everyone. If you haven't guessed, we're talking about wine. My guest is Natalie McLean. She's the author of Unquenchable. She also wrote the book Red, White, and Drunk All Over, and she's a wine writer. It's like, you'd think I'd had a few glasses this morning. I can't get my words out. I think I should have had a glass. Maybe that would have made a difference. But she's also the author of Red, White, and Drunk All Over. And I want to look, Natalie, at some of the adventures that you had in this book. And let's just set this up a little bit, because each segment in the book is a different day of the week. And you did that so that we'd have a different wine for a different day of the week. So tell us why you set it up that way.
Sure. Well, I wanted to have a narrative arc because I was jumping from country to country. And my quest was always the same, to find these great bargain wines, and by bargain, of course, I mean price-quality ratio was fantastic. I wasn't looking for just cheap wines. But apart from that, I thought I want to have something that connects all of this travel together. So that's why I start with Sunday night dinner, maybe a traditional roast beef or whatever you might have, and a more robust red. And then Monday, of course, you would slide into a very light, low-alcohol German Riesling and so on, and right round to Sunday brunch again, where we come back with rosé. So as you said, like each one is a different region, and then there's some insider tips at the end of each chapter so that you have your shopping list of wines for that day. And I should also mention, just while I'm thinking about it, I do keep posting new wines on my website at nataliemclean.com, because the wines are always changing in the store. But you get the stories and the background knowledge and the shopping tips in the book.
Yeah, and that's what's so great, because you get entertained. I learned about wine, and then if I wanted to take it further and read some more, you gave the links that where I could go find some more about it. And being a writer myself, I also love that you incorporated writers from different regions, from different countries, while you were actually traveling in that particular region. And
yes.
You said that you did that because it gave you a different sense of the environment.
Mm-hmm, that's right. I love to pick a book that is famous or iconic for the region. So, when I went to Sicily, I read The Leopard by Lampedusa, which is considered one of their, greatest writers. And so in each region, I tried to do that. And so at the end of the chapter, with those insider tips, there's suggested reading. So, I couldn't resist, though, in South Africa when we went shark diving. One of the books suggested was Jaws. But that was just for fun. But, I also put Invictus and Nelson Mandela's biography and so on, because I just think a lot of people love to read when they travel, because it sort of infuses your perceptions of the place, I think, for better. I think you have richer observations if you're reading about it while you're there.
Yeah.
Even if you can't go, you can be an armchair traveler and, read these books and drink the wines at home.
Yeah, and you get a much better sense of the culture, as you said. Well, since you mentioned Africa, let's start with Africa then. When you went shark diving, why did you go shark diving when you're visiting?
Action.
I think you did some action.
Yes, almost. Well, using a wine writer as shark bait is probably the delight of many a winemaker. I'd never been, and I thought, well, okay. It was a very popular thing to do just off the coast of South Africa, where the major wine region is, which is Stellenbosch. And so I thought, well, why don't we do that? But I wanted to make it part of the story, so I went with a winemaker who often goes. He has a real passion for surfing and shark diving. And so, I'm telling his story as well, but it really was just for the fun of it, and to be unusual. But we get into pairings afterwards and so on. But, I carry on in South Africa. That's not the end of the animals, because then I go on to milk a goat, which is not everyday wine journalism either. But I visited this winemaker who runs a winery. He has a great sense of humor. It's called the Goats de Rome winery, if you've heard of it. And he's always tweaking the French names, so it's Côte de Rome, but he names his wine Goats de Rome. And he, my favorite label of his, he's got this rather blasé-looking female goat in front of a French chateau, and he calls it Bordeaux. But I love that sense of humor, because it's not just about cheekiness and so on. As he said, the first sale for wine is what's on the label or some humor or something. The second sale is based on what was in the bottle.
Right.
Yeah, so they're making wine more accessible, more interesting. He's a fun character to profile, but he's making good wine, and I wouldn't have written about him if his wine had been really disappointing.
Right.
Yeah.
So do you have a favorite from that region? I read that is the only region, and of course it makes sense if you think about it geographically, that is actually influenced by two very different oceans, the icy Atlantic and the warm Indian Ocean. So I'm sure that has a lot of impact on the growing and what they do grow and can grow.
It does, and that confluence makes South Africa kind of the breadbasket for Africa. And because I had really archaic notions of what South Africa was in terms of a country, a territory, a geography, my notion was wild kingdom and lions and desert. But it's lush and green, and it's not hot, because they also get the Antarctic influence. And so it's a great climate for growing grapes. And many other things as well. So it's unique it's great to understand these things too by going. I think there's nothing better than going to a place and realizing, wow, this isn't what I thought it was. And it's a beautiful country, mm-hmm. and producing some spectacular wines. But one of the insider tips is, look for a wine region that has been off the market or is trying to reestablish itself. Of course, South Africa was off the North American wine market for years with apartheid. And even though that's, been more than a decade since that ended, they're still trying to establish a strong reputation again for winemaking. And so they offer incredible wines in terms of the quality and the price.
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite characters in the book was when you went to Australia and you talked with Wolf Blass, who was from Germany originally, right?
Exactly. He emigrated to Australia. He was always on the move. The man is just a tornado of energy. He's into his mid-70s, but you'd never know it. He really does have the energy of a man half his age.
And talk about cheeky.
Oh, yes, cheeky and randy. But he's always saying things with a wink and a nudge. And,
No, you know what made me really laugh, Natalie, was he would tell you things like, "Oh, we call this one a leg opener, but don't put that in the book," and so you put it in the book.
Yes, exactly. It was a two-way sort of party back and forth, because I knew he was saying things to be provocative and to see what kind of rise he could get out of me. So, as you said, he describes one of his wines, a Shiraz, as the leg opener, and then he sort of leans in to see what you're going to say, and then I look down at my notebook because that's my way of deflecting, and then he'll say, "Don't write that," and it went on and on. But he was hilarious. But again, he was very passionate about making wine, good wine at reasonable prices, and so. But he is a fun way, an interesting way to learn about Australian wine.
Yeah, and I didn't know, because one of my favorite wines actually is an Australian Shiraz, and I didn't know that was just a different name for the French. It's Syrah. Did they pronounce Syrah?
Yes.
Syrah.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. The same grape, same clone. Of course, over the years they've taken on the influences of the local environment, but and so the French Syrah is very popular in the Rhone Valley. That's where it's most heavily concentrated. But yeah, that's right.
And Australia, I mean, really, and New Zealand too, I think, produce pretty good wines now, because people used to laugh if wine came from Australia at one point,
Yeah, they've really proved themselves in terms of the quality and the price points. And New Zealand as well. New Zealand is a much smaller producing region, but their Sauvignon Blanc and their Pinot Noir, because they're cooler climate on average than Australia, are terrific. So they're terrific food wines. But yeah, the Australians really they called it the Australian invasion. About 5-7 years ago, they really leapt to the top of the market in terms of overall brand share in the wine category.
Interesting, talking about the Australian invasion, because back in the 70s you write about the German Riesling, which was prevalent when I first started going to nightclubs and stuff like that, and we would always drink Blue Nun and Black Tower, and we thought they were fantastic because they were really sweet. But it ruined the German wine reputation. I didn't realize how badly till I read your book.
Yes, yeah. That's a very closely related insider tip to South Africa. Of course, Germany is still trying to rehabilitate that reputation for the sweet and cheap. And today, their wines, particularly their Rieslings, are wonderful, complex, and they do come in a range of styles from bone dry. But when they do have some sweetness to them, it's natural fruit sweetness. It's not sugary, syrupy, simple, cloying sweetness. And so, but again, they're trying to reestablish themselves. It doesn't help that, some of the winery names are hard for us to pronounce in long, illegible Gothic script. But once you get familiar with those wines, you will pay a fraction of the cost of other great dry white wines from around the world.
Yeah, Germany used to have a great reputation in England years ago. So I was surprised to read how hard it had been hit by that marketing campaign for this really sweet stuff. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll continue talking with Natalie McLean. This is a great book. I so enjoyed reading it. It's called Unquenchable, A Tipsy Quest for the World's Best Bargain Wines. And as you can probably tell from my guest today, Natalie writes with a sense of humor, but also with a great deal of knowledge. It's very, very interesting. Please do stay with us. You're listening to Conversations Live with Vicki St. Clair.
She is coming here to stay.
Hey, brother, pour the wine.
I have waited for the day.
Hey, brother, pour the wine.
She writes of love in every letter. Others have tried, but I will get her. When you see the way she walks. Hey, brother, pour the wine.
Do you love wildlife? Then make a real difference by helping PAWS care for sick and injured wild animals. Volunteers help feed and clean the animals until they are well enough to return to the wild. Sign up today and help save a wild life. No experience necessary. All training is provided. Visit paws.org or call 425-787-2500.
Hi, I'm Andrea Kay, America's leading career expert. I know it's going to be a great conversation when Vicki St. Clair asked me to offer my career advice on her show. Vicki asks thoughtful questions, she's thorough, she works hard to bring you great guests who walk their talk with information and solutions that can lift your career and better your life so that you'll live well, live strong. My advice, tune into our conversations and all the interviews on Conversations Live with Vicki St. Clair for thought-provoking insight and tips on the things that really matter in your life. And visit AndreaK.com, that's Andrea, K-A-Y.com, for information about my books and loads of free practical advice and inspiration for your career.
If you want to reach a large audience of like-minded people, people with integrity, people who strive to live well and live strong, let Conversations Live with Vicki St. Clair shine a spotlight on your message. Tell us about your business, product, service, or event, and we'll help you craft your message and promote your good work. Email Vicki at conversationslive.net or call 425-269-4772. That's 425-269-4772.
OMG! Grammar abuse is no LOL. Hire a copywriter today and make sure your business communications rise above the crowd and deliver the results you need. Call 800-495-7617 today. BTW, IMHO, copywriters rule. Call 800-495-7617. BFN.
Thanks for listening to Conversations Live with Vicki St. Clair. Join us live every Monday at noon on Alternative Talk 1150 or stream live from conversationslive.net.
Remember, you're listening to Alternative Talk 1150 AM.
Pour the wine,
Pour it quickly once again.
hey brother, pour the wine.
She's here at last, my one and only. Goodbye, friends, and don't be lonely when you see the way she walks. Hey, brother, pour the wine.
And welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. We're talking with Natalie McLean. She has actually been voted the world's best wine writer by an organization I can't quite remember the name of, but I did check it out. The New York Times describes Natalie as a disarming every woman, and the Financial Times bills her as a new force in the wine writing world. You're not that new now, though. You've been around 12 years, right, Natalie?
It's true. I'm well preserved. Some people would say I'm completely pickled, but
you're maturing like a fine wine there.
I guess so. Yeah, a little fuzzy around the edges, though. Yeah.
So we've talked. Where have we talked about so far? Australia. We've talked about Germany a little, and South Africa.
That's right.
I wanted to talk about Portugal because you visited 8 countries in total for this particular book, but I wanted to talk about Portugal because I happen to like port. It's actually one of my favorites. I like to sip it. I can only take a little bit of it because it's a little stronger, right?
It is. The port is a fortified wine, so the alcohol level in it averages about 20% because they put in more sugar to ferment into more alcohol and still have some sweetness. It's usually an after-dinner drink. And whereas dry table wine averages between 12 and 14% alcohol, so it's quite a bit more. And that's why a little goes a long way, and you usually have maybe 2 or 3 ounces in a glass after dinner.
Mm.
Yeah.
So what was your highlight of your trip for you in Portugal?
In Portugal was probably cooking with one of the winemakers at his home in Oporto, which is where all the port ships out to around the world. And he was quite the cook, and I am not. And so it was fun. He was telling me what to do, what to chop, and so on. And he tends to be a last-minute sort of social planner. So he just invited a lot of people over who just sort of constantly dropped in all night. And at one point, very late in the evening, we all sat down. There were about 18 of us at a table. And we've been cooking all evening, multi-course meal, and it was wonderful because there were many languages around the table. We were passing lots of port around because they actually drink port throughout the meal. They're very hearty, very lots of tolerance there. Mm-hmm. And it's a great conversation. I guess my most memorable times have been around dinner tables, both for the book and in my life, because it's the conversation that animates and the good food and wine that we're sharing. I think that's what I enjoy the most.
Yeah, and I can see that your book would actually spark some great dinner conversations for anybody who's read it.
Oh,
Did
good.
you know?
Yeah, exactly. Little factoids, dinner party droplets that you can share and impress. No.
Yeah, like, for example, I read that wine has over 1,000 compounds in it.
Yeah.
The human smells over 2,000 aromas.
That's right. That's why so much of wine, the character of wine, is in the nose rather than the taste. So we humans can actually pick up 2,000 different aromas, but we get 5 tastes in our mouths. Salt, sweet, bitter. I forget. Umami is one of them.
Right.
But that's why it's good to swirl the wine and try to smell it and just think about what you might be picking up. Like when I started doing that, I think, well, this just smells like wine.
Mm-hmm.
But if you start to smell the fruit and vegetables in your kitchen, spices and so on, you start to develop a bit of an aroma vocabulary, and you start to recognize those when it comes to wine.
Yeah.
And it's just practice. It's just paying attention, that's all.
Yeah. Well, I always used to feel stupid doing that, quite honestly. So I go around sniffing.
Yeah.
But I went on a wine tasting course, and of course that was part of what we did. And I was astonished that, yes, I could smell leather. Yes, I could smell tree oak,
Exactly. And what you're trying to do with the swirling is just to agitate the wine enough to make those aromas airborne. Because just sitting in the glass, some of them will be airborne, but many more will come up to you that you'll be able to smell if you're swirling. And another neat trick is when we have the wine in our mouths and we swallow, we're heating it up with our mouth and our throat. After you swallow, try breathing out through your nose, and you'll get a much richer sense of those aromas because you've really heated it up and that sort of thing. I always advise, though, make sure you're just breathing out. Don't send the wine back that way. It's very painful and embarrassing.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
I remember a few years ago, I took my niece was visiting from England, and I took her up to Canada. We were staying with friends, so I'd taken a bottle of wine, and I asked my niece to open it, and she worked at a bar in England and putting herself through school. And so she opens the wine. She goes, "Oh, it has a cork." And I looked at her and I said, "Of course it has a cork. I don't buy screw bottle wine, screw bottle tops." But when I took my wine tasting course, you tell us about that, because I was amazed when I learned this.
Yes, well, more and more wines are closed with a screw cap. And again, that's kind of it still has a hangover image from the 70s when only Plunk was bottled under a screw cap. And so it's taking a while, but it's happening, and consumer perception is changing. The reason why that a lot of wineries are switching to screw caps is that there is a risk of cork taint with a real cork. And cork is made from the bark of a cork tree, usually from Portugal or Spain. And it can react with the chemical that's been used to clean the cork with the wine. And the result is your wine smells like a musty, moldy old attic. But there is no risk of that with screw caps. And I think the other glorious thing about screw caps is you don't need any special equipment to open your wine.
Yes.
Wine is more accessible.
Yeah.
I mean, what other drink requires, well, I guess beer does in a way, but usually you can twist that off too. So I just think it's a good thing to go with the screw cap.
Yeah, and many, the wine course I took, they said that many of the finest wineries in the world have converted to screw tops now, which was absolute news to me. I did not realize.
Yes, they have. And if you look at New Zealand in particular, almost all of the wines are under screw cap because they have one main bottling facility. So most of those are screw cap now.
Yeah, interesting. So I wanted to look at, since the holidays are coming up, a couple of wine gift ideas that you might have. I would suggest your book as a gift, if not to our listeners' selves, then as a gift for somebody else who enjoys travel and culture and wine. I mean, I think it's a great book.
Okay.
But what about, I was telling you I have a friend who he's a gourmet cook, and he's also very snobby about wine. And when I go, it's always, bring a bottle. And I panic every time I go, what do I take that is good and not too expensive? What kind of suggestions would you have?
Well, I usually suggest what I call a switch hitter wine. And what that is a wine that appeals to many palates and many dishes. So if you're not sure of the person's taste, or if you think that the person might be opening it with dinner and you're not sure how many courses and so on, these wines tend to have broad appeal. They're not too heavy, too light. and the two I'm thinking of are Riesling for the white wines and Pinot Noir for the reds. And they're packed with flavor, but they're not heavy in alcohol and oak and tannin. And I think if he's a gourmand, he'll love these wines because they're real hedonists wines. Because of the way they're made with all that flavor, but none of the heaviness.
Right.
And they're incredibly food versatile. So, I think there are a number of regions that produce terrific Rieslings and Pinot Noirs. You can go with the benchmark, like Germany for Riesling, Burgundy, France for Pinot Noir. But if you want more affordable versions of those wines, go for Washington State's Rieslings and Oregon's Pinot Noir. You'll pay half to a quarter of the price of the benchmark wine. So, you can also get something from, America, which is always a great thing, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then affordable bubbly. You recommended what we used to call when we were growing up Brut.
Yes. Yeah, for bubblies. So champagne is one of the most pricey wines going. They are such smart marketers. Their branding is fantastic, but their prices are high. So only bubbly from the Champagne region of France can be called champagne. Everything else is sparkling wine, bubbly. I think California and the cool climates of California produce terrific bubblies. So with champagne, you're going to start at $50. For a good California bubbly, it's probably $25. And I'm thinking of the area, the cooler parts of Napa, so Carneros especially. So there's like Domaine Chandon and Schramsberg, and there are a number in there. Roederer is another one that are terrific. And then you can even go to a lower price point if you go to Italy and Spain. Mm-hmm. Italy has Prosecco's. Spain has Cavas. Those are just their terms for sparkling wine. And you're probably going to pay $15, $20. And they're loaded with taste. You're not giving up taste when you go to these categories for your wine choices.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Well, I really enjoyed talking with you, really enjoyed reading your book.
Oh, thank you, Vicki.
And I mentioned it at the top of the hour. I said to people I wanted your job, but I know you've worked very hard to get this book together.
Well, it's been a long and windy road, as they say, but I really enjoyed it. And as I mentioned, if your listeners are looking for more wine tips or picks for the holidays, I have posted a new batch of wine reviews that are very, affordable but delicious at NatalieMacLean.com. So I invite them to join me there.
Great. And you also have wine pairings up there. You have recipes of some of the food that you talk about.
Exactly.
It's a really great site. You could definitely spend a couple of hours of lost time. Well, I don't know that it's lost, but, beneficial.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
a final thought you'd like to leave our listeners with today, Natalie?
You are the expert on your own palate, so don't let any critic, including me, tell you what to drink. If you like it, it's good. And don't get hung up on the perfect wine and food pairing. If you like a light wine with a hearty dish, go for it. So you always have to remember, pleasure first, and to heck with what everybody else says.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being with us today. Really appreciate it, Natalie.
Thank you, Vicki.
My guest again, Natalie MacLean. You can find out lots more about Natalie and her work at NatalieMacLean.com. Some really great information up there. And this is a fabulous book. It's called Unquenchable. I can't speak at all today. A Tipsy Quest for the World's Best Bargain Wines. We're going to be back next week. Appreciate you being with us today. If you have questions or feedback on today's show, you can find me at 800-495-7617. That's 800-495-7617. Or you can email me at info@conversationslive.net. You can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Vicki St. Clair. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you next week. Until then, live well, live strong.